The lawyer walks into the diner at 7:43 a.m. on a Wednesday, and I know he doesn't belong here before he even sits down. It's the shoes. Nobody who eats at Rosie's diner wears shoes that cost more than my monthly rent. They're polished so bright, I can see the reflection of the overhead fluorescent in them, and he's picking his way between the tables, like the floor might be contagious. I've been on shift since 5. My hair smells like bacon grease. There's a ketchup stain on my apron that I stopped caring about 2 hours ago, and my feet hurt in the specific, bone-deep way that only waitresses and nurses understand. Coffee? I ask, because that's what I ask everyone, because this is my life. 27 years old, double shifts 6 days a week, a studio apartment with a radiator that makes a sound like a dying animal but produces no heat, and a savings account with exactly $412 in it. Ms. Castillo, he says. Yara Castillo. Nobody calls me Miss Castillo. My regulars call me Y. My boss calls me Kid. My landlord calls me late on rent. That's me, I say, already calculating whether this is about a parking ticket or something worse. He sets a leather briefcase on the counter, right next to Earl's plate of eggs, which Earl does not appreciate, and pulls out a manila envelope so thick it looks like it could stop a bullet. There's a wax seal on it, an actual wax seal, like something from a period drama. My name is Richard Calloway. I'm the executor of the estate of Harold Blackwell. He slides the envelope toward me across the formica. Mr. Blackwell passed away 3 weeks ago. He left you 50% of Blackwell Industries. The coffee pot in my hand becomes very heavy. I'm sorry, I say. He left me what? 50% of Blackwell Industries. The current valuation is approximately $4.7 billion. Your share represents roughly $2.3 billion. The diner goes quiet, not because anyone heard him. He's speaking at a volume designed for courtrooms and private offices, but because the universe has a sense of timing and apparently decided that right now, in this exact moment, every single regular at Rosie's should stop chewing simultaneously. I don't know anyone named Harold Blackwell, I say. He knew you, Calloway says, and the way he says it makes it sound like a verdict. I set the coffee pot down. I pick up the envelope. My hands are shaking, which is embarrassing, so I grip it harder and pretend they're not. There must be a mistake. There is no mistake, Ms. Castillo. Mr. Blackwell amended his will 14 months ago to include you as a co-inheritor. The other 50% goes to his son, Elias Blackwell. I know that name. Everyone knows that name. Elias Blackwell has been on the cover of Forbes twice. He runs Blackwell Industries, a conglomerate that touches everything from real estate to defense contracts to pharmaceutical research. He's 32 years old, obscenely wealthy, and has a reputation for being the coldest man in American business. And apparently, I now own half his company. The terms of the will require you and Mr. Blackwell's son to co-manage the company for a period of 6 months, Calloway continues, as if he's reading a grocery list and not detonating a bomb in the middle of my life. If either party refuses or abandons the arrangement, the entire estate, both shares, will be liquidated and donated to charity. Why? The word comes out before I can stop it. Why would a man I've never met leave me half of everything? Calloway closes his briefcase, straightens his tie, gives me a look that I'll later learn is pity disguised as professionalism. That, he says, is something you'll need to discover for yourself. The Blackwell Industries headquarters is a 72-story glass tower in Midtown, that looks like God designed a knife and stood it on its point. I stand on the sidewalk in front of it at 9 a.m. the next morning, wearing the nicest blazer I own, which is a second-hand Ann Taylor I bought at Goodwill for $11, and a pair of jeans because I don't own dress pants, and I stare up at 72 floors of power and money and think about how badly I want to turn around and walk back to the diner. But I can't, because Calloway made it very clear. If I don't show up, the whole thing goes to charity. And while I have nothing against charity, $2.3 billion is the kind of number that doesn't let you walk away from it. Not when your radiator doesn't work. Not when you've been waitressing since you were 19. Not when the reason you have $400 in savings is because that's all that's left after rent, groceries, and the student loans for a degree you never finished. The lobby is marble and glass and silence. It's the kind of space designed to make people like me feel microscopic. And it works. My sneakers squeak on the floor. The security guard looks at me like I wandered in off the street, which technically I did. I'm here for the Blackwell estate meeting, I say, and I sound exactly as ridiculous as I feel. He checks a list, looks at me, checks the list again. 68th floor, he says, and hands me a visitor badge that weighs more than my phone. The elevator is glass. I can see the city shrinking below me as I rise, and my reflection in the polished walls looks like a stranger. A woman in an ill-fitting blazer clutching a manila envelope like a lifeline, ascending into a world where she has no business existing. The doors open to a hallway that smells like leather and ambition. A woman in a gray suit leads me to a conference room with floor-to-ceiling windows and a table long enough to land a small airplane on. The city sprawls below in every direction, golden in the morning light. I sit at one end of the table. The chair is so comfortable it feels like a trap, and then he walks in. Elias Blackwell is taller than he looks in photographs, which is saying something because in photographs, he looks like he was manufactured to intimidate. Dark blonde hair styled back from a face that belongs on a coin. All angles and authority, steel gray eyes that sweep the room and land on me with the precision of a laser sight. He doesn't sit at the other end of the table. He walks to the middle, places both hands flat on the surface and leans forward. You, he says. Not a question. A classification, like he's identified a species of pest. Me, I say, because if I don't say something I'm going to throw up, and at least this is a word I know. You're the waitress. I prefer Yara. His jaw tightens. His gray eyes don't blink. He looks at me the way you look at a math problem that shouldn't exist, with the specific frustration of someone who is used to the world making sense and has just encountered a variable that doesn't. My father, he says, and his voice is controlled in a way that tells me the control is costing him everything. Built this company from nothing. He spent 40 years of his life constructing something that matters, something that employs 32,000 people, something that funds hospitals, research centers, infrastructure. He straightens up, buttons his jacket. The gesture is so precise it feels like armor being donned. And he left half of it to a woman who serves pancakes. I also serve omelets, I say. It's a terrible thing to say. I know it's a terrible thing to say even as the words are leaving my mouth. But something about the way he said pancakes, like the word was beneath him, like my entire life was a punchline, trips a wire inside me that I didn't know was there. His eyes narrow. For a fraction of a second, something that isn't contempt flashes across his face. Surprise, maybe? Or the faintest ghost of interest. It's gone before I can name it. This will be contested, he says. My lawyer says it can't be, I reply, Because Calloway briefed me on this exact scenario, and he was very thorough. Every will can be contested, Ms. Castillo. Your father's lawyer disagrees, and since your father chose that lawyer, and your father chose me, it seems like your father's judgment is the one that matters here. The room goes so quiet I can hear the building's ventilation system. Somewhere 68 floors below. The city keeps moving, oblivious to the fact that a waitress just told a billionaire his dead father outranks him. Calloway clears his throat from the doorway. If we could begin the formal reading of the terms. Elias doesn't look at him. He's still looking at me, and the expression on his face is something I'll spend the next 6 months trying to decode. Fury, yes. Contempt, obviously. But underneath both, buried so deep I almost miss it, fear. He's afraid of me. Not of what I'll do to his company. Of what I represent. Of the question I embody. Why did his father trust a stranger more than his own son? He doesn't know the answer. Neither do I. But I'm going to find out. The first month is war. Elias Blackwell fights me on everything. Every proposal I make, he blocks. Every meeting I attend, he undermines. He schedules board presentations when he knows I'll be unprepared. He fills the conference room with executives who look at me like I'm a stain on the company's reputation. He sends me financial reports so dense with jargon, they might as well be written in another language. He wants me to quit. He wants me to buckle under the weight of a world I don't understand, pack up my second-hand blazer, and crawl back to the diner where I belong. He doesn't know me very well. I may not understand leveraged buyouts or quarterly projections. I may not know the difference between a prospectus and a profit and loss statement. But I know how to work harder than anyone in the room. I've been doing it since I was 15, bussing tables at my aunt's restaurant after school, studying until 2 a.m., holding 3 jobs in college before the money ran out, and I had to drop out anyway. I don't quit. It's not in my programming, so I study. Every night, after the building empties and the cleaning crew comes through, and the security guard on the 68th floor starts giving me sympathetic looks, I sit at the conference table surrounded by textbooks and financial reports, and I teach myself the language of his world. I learn what EBITDA means. I learn how to read a balance sheet. I learn the difference between a hostile takeover and a friendly acquisition. And I learn that in Elias Blackwell's world, there's no such thing as friendly. The worst part isn't the boardroom battles, or the financial jargon, or even the way he looks at me like I'm something stuck to the bottom of his Italian leather shoes. The worst part is the small moments, the cracks in his armor that appear when he doesn't know I'm watching. I catch him in his father's old office one evening, standing in front of a photograph of Harold and a woman I assume was his mother. He's not doing anything. Just standing. His hand is raised, fingers hovering an inch from the glass of the frame, like he wants to touch it, but can't. Like there's a wall between him and every soft thing in the world. He senses me in the doorway. The hand drops. The mask slides back on so fast it's like watching someone put on armor in real time. The quarterly reports are on your desk, he says, and walks past me without making eye contact. I start staying late not just to study, but to watch, to understand, because something about this man doesn't add up. The cruelty is too precise, too calculated, too performative. Real cruelty is lazy. His is exhausting, like he has to work at being cold, like warmth is his natural state, and he's spending every ounce of energy suppressing it. I find out about the charity work by accident. A late-night Google search reveals that Elias Blackwell personally funds 14 children's hospitals, 9 literacy programs, and a foundation that provides college scholarships for first-generation students. None of it is public. None of it is branded with the Blackwell name. He does it anonymously, through shell organizations, as if kindness is something to be ashamed of. I look at those search results on my phone at midnight, in the empty conference room, and I think about a man who builds walls so thick that no one can see the garden behind them. 3 weeks in, I present my first proposal to the board. It's small. A recommendation to restructure the company's community outreach program, something I actually know about from 8 years of working in a neighborhood where outreach is the difference between someone eating dinner and someone going hungry. I expect him to destroy it. I've rehearsed my defense. I've prepared counter-arguments, data, projections. He doesn't say a word. He sits at the other end of the table, arms crossed, and he listens. And when I'm done, and the board looks at him for the verdict, he says, "Proceed." That's it. One word. Proceed. But when I look at him across the table, there's something in his gray eyes that wasn't there before. It's small. A shift. Like a locked door developing its first hairline crack. I don't know what's behind it yet. But I'm starting to want to find out. The second month brings a shift I don't expect. It starts small. A coffee cup left on my desk in the morning. Exactly how I take it. Black. 2 sugars. I didn't tell anyone how I take my coffee. He noticed. Then it's the files. The dense financial reports that used to arrive on my desk like weapons of war start arriving with handwritten notes in the margins. Not explanations, exactly. Annotations. A circled number with a tiny arrow pointing to a note. This is inflated. Ask Chen in accounting for the real figure. A highlighted paragraph with, "Sullivan's people wrote this section. Ignore it." He's helping me. Quietly. Anonymously. Like the charity work. I don't mention it. Neither does he. But the war starts feeling less like a war, and more like a dance. 2 people circling each other, testing boundaries, building something neither of them has agreed to build. He still argues with me in meetings. I still argue back. But the arguments start lasting longer than they need to, and sometimes I catch him almost smiling before he catches himself, and sometimes I feel his eyes on me from across the conference table like a physical weight, warm and heavy, and impossible to ignore. One night I'm working late, and he appears in the doorway with 2 containers of Thai food. "You haven't eaten," he says. Not a question. I'm fine. "You've been here since 6 a.m. It's 11. Eat." He sets the food on the table and sits across from me, and we eat in silence that should be awkward, but isn't. The city glows through the windows. The building hums around us. And somewhere in the quiet, I realize that this is the first meal I've shared with another person in months that didn't involve a diner counter and a customer on the other side. "Your proposal last week," he says, without looking up from his pad thai. "The community outreach restructure. What about it?" It was good. He says it like the words cost him money. The board was impressed. You voted against it in the meeting. I voted to table it for further review. That's not the same thing. He finally looks at me. I wanted it to be airtight before Sullivan could pick it apart. I had my team strengthen the financial projections over the weekend. I stare at him. "You spent your weekend improving my proposal. I spent my weekend protecting the company's interests. By helping me." He doesn't answer. He picks up his fork. He eats his pad thai. But the tips of his ears turn red, and I file that information away in the growing folder in my mind labeled "Things Elias Blackwell doesn't want me to know about him." The journal changes everything. I find it in Harold Blackwell's private office, a room on the 72nd floor that Elias hasn't entered since his father died. I go there looking for old company records, What I find is a leather-bound journal on the desk, open to a page dated 14 months before Harold's death. The entry is about me, not by name, not at first. It starts with a description of a diner. My diner. Harold Blackwell walked into Rosie's on a Tuesday afternoon, sat at the counter and ordered a cup of coffee. He was, according to his own words, having the worst day of his life. A doctor's appointment that morning had given him a timeline. 18 months. Maybe less. He sat at my counter and I poured his coffee, and I noticed his hands were shaking. I remember this. Not the man. I serve hundreds of people, but the moment I remember seeing an older man whose hands trembled so badly he couldn't lift his cup, and I remember sitting down across from him and saying, "Tell me about the best day of your life." It's something I do. When someone at the counter looks like the world is ending, I ask them about its beginning. It costs nothing. It takes 5 minutes. And sometimes, for those 5 minutes, the worst day of someone's life becomes bearable. Harold wrote 3 pages about that conversation, about the best day of his life, the day his son was born, about the worst day, the day his wife died, and something inside Elias shut off and never turned back on, about the regret of building an empire and losing his son somewhere inside it. He came back, every Tuesday for 6 months. He sat at my counter and we talked, about everything, about nothing, about the small, ordinary miracles of a life lived at the speed of real. He never told me his name. He never told me he was rich. He wore old clothes, a corduroy jacket with patches on the elbows, a faded baseball cap from some college I didn't recognize, and tipped well and laughed at my bad jokes, and once helped me carry a case of coffee cups from the delivery truck, because the delivery driver was running late and I was alone. I remember that now. I remember a kind old man lifting a heavy box, like it mattered, like helping a waitress with her delivery was as important as any board meeting or shareholder vote. I thought he was a retired teacher or maybe an accountant. I liked him. He was the kind of regular you look forward to seeing, the kind who asks how your day is and actually waits for the answer. He wrote about our conversations in meticulous detail. The time I told him about my mother, how she worked 3 jobs after my father left and still managed to read to me every night, and how she died when I was 22, and the world has been quieter ever since. The time I told him about dropping out of college, not because I wasn't smart enough, but because the money ran out and there was no one to call, no safety net, no Blackwell fortune waiting to catch me. The time I told him about my dream of opening a community kitchen, a place where people could eat for free, and nobody had to feel ashamed about being hungry. He was, according to his journal, happier in those 6 months than he'd been in the previous 20 years. The last entry is dated 1 week before he amended his will. She sees people, he wrote. Not their money, not their titles, not the armor they build to survive. She sees the human being underneath, and she sits with them, and she asks them about their best day. My son has forgotten how to be seen. He's spent so long behind the walls I helped him build that he doesn't know how to come out. Maybe she can find him. Maybe she can do for him what she did for me. Remind him that the best parts of life happen at a diner counter at 7 in the morning, not in a boardroom on the 68th floor. I close the journal. I sit in Harold Blackwell's chair, and I cry. Not for the money, not for the company, for a kind old man who drank coffee at my counter and never told me his name, and who believed, with the desperate, beautiful faith of a dying father, that a waitress could save his son. I show Elias the journal on a Thursday night. We're alone in his office. It's past midnight. We've been reviewing acquisition proposals for a tech startup, And somewhere in the past month, the war between us has shifted into something else. Not peace, not friendship. Something with no name. A charged awareness. A gravitational pull that neither of us acknowledges, but both of us feel. He reads in silence. I watch his face. The mask holds for the first 2 pages. By the 3rd, cracks appear. By the 4th, his hand is shaking the way his father's did that first day at the counter. By the 5th, he closes the journal and presses both palms flat on the desk, and breathes like a man trying not to drown. He never told me, Elias says. His voice is barely audible. He never mentioned you. He never mentioned the diner. He came every Tuesday. Tuesdays. He almost laughs. He told me he was at physical therapy on Tuesdays. He was, in a way. He looks at me then, really looks at me, without the armor, without the contempt, without the walls his father built and he inherited, and has been maintaining ever since. His gray eyes are wet. His jaw is trembling. And the man underneath all that power and fury and control is just a boy who lost his mother too young, and his father too late, and has been alone in this glass tower for so long, he forgot what warmth feels like. Why didn't you tell me sooner? He asks. Because you needed to see me first, I say. Not the waitress, not the intruder, me. I see you, he says, and the way he says it, raw, broken, like a confession pulled from somewhere he didn't know existed, tells me he means it. I know, I say. He reaches across the desk. His hand covers mine. His fingers are shaking. Mine are steady. And in the silence of the 72nd floor, with his father's words between us and the city glowing below, something that started as a war becomes something neither of us has a name for yet. But we will. The 5th month is when everything falls apart. A board member named Sullivan, Elias's godfather, a man who's been circling the company like a vulture since Harold's diagnosis, launches a hostile takeover attempt. He's been buying shares quietly for months. He has allies on the board. He has a legal team that could populate a small country. And he has a weapon he's been saving for exactly the right moment. Me. He leaks my background to the press. Waitress. College dropout. No business experience. No connections. No pedigree. The headlines write themselves. Blackwell billions left to diner waitress, hide company in chaos. The stock drops 9% in 2 days. Board members who smiled at me last week won't meet my eyes. The worst part is the personal attacks. Sullivan's people dig up everything. My father leaving when I was 12, my mother's medical bills, my dropped-out transcript from community college. They paint a picture of a woman so desperate and pathetic that she must have manipulated a dying old man into rewriting his will. Comments sections fill with strangers who've never met me explaining exactly what kind of person I am. I read them at 3 a.m. in my apartment. The nice apartment Elias insisted on, the one with a working radiator and windows that face the park. And I feel the familiar weight of being reduced to a story someone else is telling about me. I've felt it before, when my father left, when I dropped out, when the electricity got shut off for the 3rd time in a year, and the neighbors looked at me with that particular brand of pity that feels like a verdict. I don't cry. I've used up my lifetime supply of tears on lesser things. Instead, I put on my second-hand blazer and my borrowed confidence, and I walk into Blackwell Industries the next morning, like I own half of it. Because I do. Elias could save himself. If he publicly distances himself from me, if he joins Sullivan's faction and argues that the will should be invalidated, he can keep his half, push me out, and maintain control. Sullivan makes the offer directly, in this very conference room, with a smugness that makes me want to throw my coffee in his face. I expect Elias to take it. Some part of me, the part that still remembers the man who called me the woman who serves pancakes, expects him to choose his empire over whatever this fragile, unnamed thing between us has become. He stands up. He buttons his jacket. He looks at Sullivan with an expression I've never seen before. The cold, annihilating focus of a man who has just identified an enemy and decided to destroy them. My father built this company, he says. He chose her. And if you think I'm going to dishonor his memory to help you steal what he built, you don't know the Blackwells as well as you think you do. He turns to me, in front of Sullivan, in front of the board, in front of everyone. Whatever you need, he says. I'm with you. Sullivan's takeover attempt fails spectacularly. Elias and I fight it together, side by side, late nights and early mornings, strategy sessions that turn into conversations, that turn into silences, where we sit close enough to touch, but don't, because we both know that once we cross that line, there's no going back. The battle takes 3 weeks. 3 weeks of legal filings, and shareholder meetings and press conferences where Elias stands beside me, literally beside me, shoulder to shoulder, a united front, and answers every question with the same steady conviction. He calls me his partner, not his co-inheritor, not the other beneficiary. His partner. The first time he says it, at a press conference on the courthouse steps, I feel something shift in my chest, like tectonic plates rearranging. He glances at me after he says it, just for a second, and in that second, his gray eyes are soft and warm and terrified, and I realize that the word wasn't for the cameras. It was for me. After the last shareholder vote, the one that officially kills Sullivan's bid, we sit in his office at midnight with a bottle of wine that costs more than my old monthly rent. I'm on the leather couch. He's on the floor, his back against the couch, his head tipped back, close enough that I could run my fingers through his hair if I wanted to. I want to. Thank you, I say, for choosing me. I didn't choose you, he says, staring at the ceiling. My father chose you. I just finally understood why. Why? He turns his head. From this angle, looking up at me, he doesn't look like a billionaire. He looks like a man who has been lonely for a very long time, and has just realized he doesn't have to be. Because you're the bravest person I've ever met, he says, and because you asked my father about the best day of his life, when everyone else was too busy asking him about his money. I don't say anything. My hand moves on its own. My fingers find his hair, and I run them through it once, gently, and he closes his eyes and exhales like he's been holding his breath for 32 years. We cross it on a Tuesday night, because of course it's a Tuesday. We're on the rooftop garden, the one Harold built for his wife 30 years ago, the one Elias hasn't visited since she died. I'm reading Harold's journal out loud, the last entry, the one about the best parts of life happening at a diner counter. My voice breaks on the last sentence. Elias doesn't say anything. He takes the journal gently from my hands, sets it on the bench beside us, cups my face in both hands, and kisses me. It's not a movie kiss. It's not smooth or practiced or choreographed. It's desperate and trembling and tastes like salt, because we're both crying, and his hands are shaking the way his father's did, and mine are gripping his shirt so hard the fabric will never recover. I see you, he whispers against my lips. I know, I say. The 6 months end on a Saturday. Calloway reads the final assessment in the same conference room where this all began. Both parties have fulfilled the terms of the will. The estate is finalized. Blackwell Industries will continue under joint leadership. The board applauds. The lawyers shake hands. Sullivan resigned 3 weeks ago. Last I heard, he's under investigation for insider trading, which couldn't have happened to a more deserving person. Elias and I sign the final papers side by side. His hand finds mine under the table. Our fingers lace together like they've been doing it for years. After the room empties, he turns to me. "My father was right about you," he says. "About what?" "You see people." "I see you," I say, because it's the truest thing I've ever said, and because it's what started all of this. Not the will, not the money, not the empire. A cup of coffee, and a question asked to a trembling old man in a diner at 7 in the morning. He pulls me close. I rest my head against his chest and listen to his heartbeat. Steady now, no longer the guarded rhythm of a man at war with the world. The city stretches below us in every direction. Glass and steel and light. And somewhere down there is a diner, where an empty stool at the counter still holds the ghost of a kind man, who believed that the best things in life can't be inherited. They have to be found. Elias proposes on a Tuesday. We're at the diner. My diner. He's sitting on Harold's stool, the last one at the counter, tucked against the wall. And I'm behind the counter in my old apron, because Rosie needed help during the breakfast rush. And some things never change, no matter how many zeros are in your bank account. It's been 3 months since the 6-month agreement ended. 3 months of learning how to be together without the structure of a legal obligation, forcing us into the same room. 3 months of discovering that what we built under pressure doesn't crumble without it. It grows. He shows up at the diner on Tuesday mornings. I show up at board meetings on Wednesday afternoons. We're building something his father dreamed of. A company that remembers the people it serves. Run by 2 people who remember what it's like to be forgotten. He orders coffee. I pour it. And when I set the cup down, there's a ring sitting in the saucer. I stare at it. The diner keeps moving around us. Earl eating his eggs. The morning regulars reading their papers. Rosie shouting an order to the kitchen. But for me, time stops. The ring is not a Blackwell ring. It's not some obscene diamond the size of a small planet that screams, "Look how much I can afford." It's a simple gold band with a single warm stone. And when I pick it up and look at the inscription inside, my heart breaks open in a way I didn't know it could. Best day. "Harold Blackwell," I say, and my voice is cracking and I don't care. Would have loved this. "Harold Blackwell," Elias says, and his grey eyes are shining and his voice is steady in a way that tells me he rehearsed this and is still terrified. Planned this. He put the ring in a safety deposit box 14 months ago. The instructions said to give it to you when I was ready. And you're ready. He reaches across the counter and takes my hand, the hand that pours coffee, and carries trays and signs billion-dollar contracts, and held his while he read his father's journal and wept. "I've been ready since the day you told me you also serve omelets," he says. I laugh. I cry. I come around the counter and sit in his lap in front of God and Earl and the entire breakfast rush. And I kiss him until the regulars start applauding, and Rosie threatens to charge us for a table. We get married on the rooftop. The same rooftop where Harold built a garden for the wife he loved and lost. The same rooftop where Elias and I had our first kiss on a Tuesday night. The guest list is small. The vows are long. He cries during his. I cry during mine. Earl is there, in a suit he borrowed from his nephew, and he raises his glass and says, "About damn time," which is the most eloquent toast anyone gives all night. Our daughter is born on a Tuesday. We name her Rose, after the diner, after the garden, after the idea that beautiful things grow in unlikely places if you give them enough light. She has his gray eyes and my dark hair, and Harold's stubborn chin. And on the morning after she's born, Elias sits in the hospital room, holding her like she's made of glass and whispers to her about the best day of his life. This one. Today. And every Tuesday that came before it. I lean my head against his shoulder and watch the sunrise paint the city gold through the hospital window, and I think about a kind old man who walked into a diner and asked for coffee, and got something money couldn't buy. He got seen. And so did we.